Hey everyone, this is James from Italian Genre Cinema Reviews, talking about Poliziotteschi's and Jollies. So today I am bringing another review, Rome, The Other Face of Violence, 1976. Unfortunately, this may be my last review for just a little bit. My wife and I are expecting our first child very soon, so that will probably kind of get in the way, at least for the next few months. But I do hope to come back in a couple of months and retain my taste for kind of this Italian genre cinema in the 70s and the 80s, and you know, there's all kinds of films here, all kinds of stuff that I wanted to cover. And you know, there's a lot of different reasons to cover different films in the genre. One reason is because it's a genre classic and it's a really great film. You could make the case that this is a genre classic. For me, at least, it gets almost there. I have to think about it a little bit more to think if it's there. I know there are some people that place this film extremely high on the list. For me, at least, this is very, very solid and absolutely worth checking out for anyone that is into Eurocrime or Poliziotteschi films. I have to think again if it's kind of like that genre masterpiece category or not. Or the other reason is because these are underseen films. And I would say this 100% fits that boat. I think this is a film that is severely underseen. This film has about 210 views on Letterboxd. And again, that's not the perfect metric to track how popular a film is. But I think, you know, it's a pretty reasonable way to compare films in kind of like the online sphere of how many people have seen them and how many have not. And 210 is not a lot. Comparatively, something like Caliber 9 is something like 10,000. So that is 50 times as many people on Letterboxd have seen Caliber 9 as this film. And I think Caliber 9 is not 50 times better than this film. I think Caliber 9 is a little bit better than this film. But Rome, The Other Face of Violence, I think is definitely one of maybe top 15, 20 Poliziotteschi Eurocrimes. And I think it's one of those ones that if a big boutique Blu-ray label came out and released this would be one that's really, really satisfying for quite a lot of people. So this film was made 1976. So that is, I think, if you look at kind of the genre, that's towards the tail end of the genre, but it's still kind of in that meaty middle of the 70s. The Italian, if you look at the Italian film industry just in general, it kind of peaks on 1975 and just kind of comes down pretty rapidly after. So this is still kind of in that peak of Italian genre film. And so this film, interestingly, is directed by Marino Girolami. Not a director we've talked about yet, but it does kind of fit neatly into the couple of reviews that I have talked about recently, the Enzo Castellari episode and the Heroin Busters episode. The reason being, Marino Girolami is Enzo G. Castellari's father. So Enzo G. Girolami in Inglourious Basterds. So this is his dad, who was a former boxer, and I talked a little bit in the Castellari episode about how his family was a bunch of filmmakers. This one features his brother in one of kind of the supporting roles there, as well as his dad, who actually directed the film. And so if you watch that really great Mike Malloy documentary on Eurocrime films, you would know that they kind of recruited Marino Girolami to direct a couple Poliziotteschi's Violent Rome and A Special Cop in Action. I think it's also known as Violent Italy. So those are both Maurizio Merli vehicles, because they had originally wanted his son, Enzo Castellari, to direct them, and instead they could not get him and instead settled for his dad, who I think does a very serviceable job in both those films. I don't think those films quite reach the levels of Rome, The Other Side of The Other Face of Violence, but nevertheless, they're both worth checking out if you do like those films, specifically if you like different Merli films. And I think if you look closely, and this time, you know, I think when I originally watched this film 3 years ago or 4 years ago or so, I was unaware of those different connections. I think if you watch that knowing that this is Castellari's dad, I think the father is taking a couple tricks from the son, or at least had learned some along the way. The use of slow motion in particular really stands out. I don't think he quite has the action grasp quite as well as his son, but his son was probably the best action director in Italy, certainly during that time. So it's something like the slow-mo shots and action shots are really, really good and really satisfying if you like that kind of very stylized action. And you do get some really, really great ones here. Let's see. So why should you watch this film? Okay, I will be spoiling this film, by the way. I think this one is one, if you like the Poliziotteschi, this hits a lot of the tropes that are very, very satisfying for different genre fans. You have great sets, you have great music, The location of Rome is very, very good, and I think this is also uncommonly well plotted. So I'll talk a little bit about the writing. I don't know who to give credit to. There's 3 writers credited on this film, but I do think kind of the way it's written, and especially the way it culminates and has a very, very satisfying ending for one of these films, often, especially considering kind of just the bulk quantity of these movies being made. It's not like these films necessarily required a ton of attention to detail, and scripts were combed over time and time and time again, and with years of just kind of filmmaking going into it. A lot of these films were cranked out very, very fast, and these guys like to work. They did a lot of different movies pretty fast, so very much intended to kind of all be just mass-produced B-movie sort of things. And I have not quite seen enough of Marino Girolami. I've seen 4 of his films, 3 of them Poliziotteschi is the 2 I mentioned earlier, this film and Zombie Holocaust, which is, kind of what it is. To know if, this film is everyone doing their career best, or if there's actually a lot of other films in Marino Girolami's filmography worth checking out. So I know I have a lot of fans that are also equally into this Italian genre cinema. So if you're someone that's seen more than those films, let me know what you think. Let me know if there are some underrated gems in sitting kind of in the crates that Marino Girolami directed that are worth checking out. Nevertheless, I think this film has a lot of people doing very, very great work, and I think it's easily my favorite of the 4 films that I've seen Marino Girolami. When we're talking about different ways that films can stand out in genre too, I think there's a lot of different ways that it can go. One way is to go really, really extreme. Maybe the best example of that, in my opinion, is something like Almost Human, where you have a really, really hard-hitting, great Tomas Milian performance, and it really, really pushes the limits of kind of what's acceptable. And that's a film that everyone is just going to have a reaction to, and some people might just be utterly revolted by it. For me, at least, it's very, very unforgettable, and I think that's the reason that film really, really stands out. Kidnap Syndicate is another example that I wanted to point out, and that's an example not of pushing the limits so far, but you're more doing a twist, and you're subverting, you're kind of taking the genre and going in slightly different directions. That's basically Fernando de Leo doing Kurosawa's High and Low, but injecting a lot of kind of the class consciousness, the upper class, lower class sort of stuff that would be prevalent in Italy at the time, and that's a very, very good movie too. Or the last option, in my opinion, is you just execute the film very, very well, and you just hit on in terms of production, you hit in terms of performances and things like that. And I think that's where this film fits in. I think everyone is just doing a really, really good job here. One example would be Anthony Steffan. He's not my favorite actor. In my opinion, he does not quite hold the screen like a star would. But here, he's actually very, very good. And part of that could be just because he's being able to use a little more sparingly than he would in a couple of the other films that I've seen him in. And I think this is definitely my favorite of his, and he really can carry kind of that emotional weight of the conclusion to the very, very end there. So in that sense, I think, he's one person that really stands out as doing a job that I think is much better than kind of the average Anthony Steffan performance. Okay, so let's see. This film is written well. The 3 writers here are Claire Cinco Solevio. I'm not sure what else she directed, or she wrote. She didn't have a ton of credits, and the other 2 are kind of Italian genre writer stalwarts. You have Vincenzo Menino and Gianfranco Clerici. Those 2 worked together on a bunch of films. They kind of just bounced around all over, Castellari films, Fulci films. But this film really stands out amongst Poliziotteschi's, many of which can kind of be taken just straight from the news, kind of like very, very straightforward films. There's a lot of doubles in this film, which I think are great devices for social commentary. One example is just kind of brother-sister, see how the different life paths converge. We also have 2 different gangs of criminals here, which is a great way to kind of show just kind of different reactions, how these gangs are. And just kind of the different dynamics. And it just feels a lot more lived in. I mean, this is a film where we have people constantly giving shit to the police and not wanting to talk, not wanting to be the stool pigeon. We also even have this moment where the criminals are like, yeah, these guys fuck stuff up so badly for us that we want to rat them out and give them to the police because they're making life very, very difficult for us. So it feels a lot more well thought out. Again, like doubles and different people in different social classes that are going different directions, that sort of thing. It also does a very good job of just combining a lot of different kind of Poliziotteschi types into one. For instance, we have kind of the rich kids doing terrible things thing. That's actually one of my lesser favorite Poliziotteschi tropes, but when you integrate it in with all these other different things, I think it works really well. And again, as I said, you have these great sets, and we use these, not really great sets so much as great locations, and they're just using these locations fantastically for different car chases and things like that. I mean, Italy and Rome, the heart of Italy, are just fantastic locations to just showcase all this like crazy, dangerous stuff that's going on. And the film, and I think the reason why myself and a lot of people like these sorts of films is there's like this kind of dangerous feel to it. It doesn't feel, if it has the feeling like anything can happen. Bystanders are getting killed, bystanders are getting injured. There's just a sense of danger that's going on. And it doesn't take long before we just start killing innocent girls and things like that. And it has like this sense of pushing things too far in a way that, is totally absent from Hollywood, certainly now. And even in the 70s and 80s, I think these Italian genre films were pushing the limits of acceptability way more than kind of the American contemporaries there. I mean, even just from the opening, we have like old people being smacked in the face, being pushed down the stairs, maids just being smacked around. So it really doesn't hold back. We have cops getting killed right from the get-go. There's a pace to these things, and there's a mean-spiritedness to it that, for me at least, really, really hits the spot. And, for for someone with my taste, it makes me feel stuff. So I really like that too. The score was done by Fabio Frizzi and Tempera. Doesn't really sound like the scores that Fabio Frizzi would end up doing for Fulci just a few years later. It sort of has like this similar instrumentation to the French Connection, a lot of piano and that kind of stuff. But it's a great score. It really, really works very well. Reminds me a little bit of the Morricone scores that he was doing into these different Poliziotteschi's too. I would say maybe my favorite performer of them all here is Marcel Bozuffi, and he's just one of those reliable faces. He's always really good. He's one of those unsung heroes of Italian genre films, specifically the Poliziotteschi's. I think it's called 38 Special Squad that he's really good in too. Is that right? I'd have to look that up. But sort of like, I saw someone in the Letterboxd reviews comparing him to Enrico Maria Salerno. Totally agree. Those are both just like kind of these reliable faces that are just enhancing just about every role that they're in. There's just like a sense of gravitas, and they kind of have like this character actor, middle-aged faces and stuff like that. And it just works really wonderfully here. And so I think maybe that's the reason why Anthony Stefan is much better here and much more effective, is because he has someone like Marcel Bozuffi to hold up the other side of things. So again, I talked a little bit about what I liked in terms of the social commentary, people's relationship with the police, and the film really does have a little bit to say, certainly about kind of that rich-poor dynamic. This is not quite Damiani sense of social commentary or anything like that, but it's good, and it works really well. And I think one thing, this film probably has one of the absolute best or most hard-hitting conclusions of any Poliziotteschi, and it really, really works. And I think it concludes on a really great high note, which is perhaps another reason why people kind of regard this film so highly that are into the genre. Why is it underrated? That's a very good question, and I think perhaps a lot of it just comes down to the personnel. If you were to replace Bozuffi, as great as he is here, with Franco Nero, maybe a lot more people have seen this film, maybe the film has been restored. So I think that does have something to do with it, the fact that this film doesn't have kind of the major Eurocrime star that you could have had. It doesn't have a Bozuffi and Anthony Stefan are not quite, Franco Nero or even Luc Merenda. Who won the film? I'm going to give it to Marino Girolami. I think he just does a great job here. There's great action. There's a lot of car chases. There's always something being tossed into the mix to keep the pacing interesting. And I think the way that the film weaves in different doubles and social commentaries like that is just really well done. It's just a damn solid entry into the Poliziotteschi genre. And I think this one's probably a pretty good intro too, just because it has a lot of the different tropes and they're just executed not half-assed but very well. Okay, so in terms of rating, I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. I think it's just really, really good. And if you have not seen this film, definitely check it out. Okay, well, thank you all for tuning in. I will see you all next time.